The coffee cup was still warm when I set it down beside the laptop, steam curling upward like a silent sigh. The leather of my office chair squeaked softly beneath me as I leaned forward, blinking at the spreadsheet I had spent the past 2 weeks perfecting. I remember thinking, maybe, just maybe, this time, someone would finally say it. Good job, David. They didn't. Let me take you back. I'm a 35-year-old business analyst working for a mid-size marketing firm in downtown Chicago. You wouldn't know the name of the company if I told you, and I'm not going to, mostly because they're not special. We're one of hundreds of data-driven insight firms that pop up in every mid-tier metro area across the country. My job is basically to make other people look smarter. I take raw client data, sales, social trends, heat maps, whatever, and I mold it into something our execs can pitch with confidence. Graphs, projections, clean takeaways that dazzle in a 10-slide deck. Most of the time, the people sitting at the top of the call have no idea what I did or how I did it. They just know it looks good when they present it. That's what this story is about. Or rather, the moment I stopped letting them get away with it. My boss, Trevor Kingsley, was the kind of man who knew how to weaponize charisma. Early 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of clean, sculpted beard that made him look like a tech startup founder, even though he never actually wrote a single line of code. He had a talent for repeating buzzwords in ways that made people believe he came up with them. Emotional analytics, virality prediction, organic engagement clustering. None of these terms meant anything, but when Trevor said them in a meeting, people nodded like he'd just quoted Einstein. I used to think I was lucky to be under him. Young analysts didn't often get FaceTime with clients. Trevor made sure I was looped into project briefings, sometimes even asked for my raw output before meetings. At first, I thought he was mentoring me. Then I started noticing a pattern. The slide decks he presented had my layouts. The phrasing in his emails mirrored the exact language I'd used in internal memos. And once, I remember this vividly, he took a predictive model I'd built for a telecom client and presented it as an internal algorithm he'd personally developed. I sat 2 rows behind him in that meeting, heart racing, palms cold. He didn't even glance my way. The breaking point wasn't a single incident. It was a buildup, like a leaky pipe slowly soaking into the drywall until one day the whole ceiling collapses. It was a Thursday morning in early March when the ceiling started to creak. The company had landed a major new client, Nexora, a fintech firm trying to expand into Gen Z markets. They wanted hard data on user behavior, influencer impact cycles, and campaign ROI projections. It was a beast of a project. The kind of account that could define your year. Trevor, of course, stepped in to lead the strategy team. And I, because I was the quiet numbers guy, was handed the data lake and told to see what stories you can pull out. He said it like he was asking me to go panning for gold, like it was a hobby. I didn't complain. I just nodded and got to work. For 2 straight weeks, I barely left my apartment except to walk my dog, Bruno. He's a chunky Labrador mix with anxiety worse than mine, and that's saying something. While he napped beside me on the couch, I ran regression analyses, A/B simulations, social listening threads, and sentiment tracking through every major platform. It was the most ambitious data synthesis I'd ever built. I wasn't just pulling numbers. I was telling a story. How micro-influencers in niche communities shaped fintech adoption patterns. How TikTok virality translated into measurable conversions. How even negative PR cycles could be harnessed for rebound traction. It was good work, really good, and I was proud of it. Until the meeting. Trevor scheduled the pitch for the following Tuesday at 10 a.m. sharp. It was going to be a hybrid presentation. The Nexora team was flying in from New York, but half of our team would be remote. We met the night before to go over the deck, or rather, his version of the deck. I sat across from him in a dim conference room while he clicked through slide after slide that mirrored my exact analysis. Stripped of my voice, no attribution, no footnotes, no mention of the data modeling methods I'd spent hours fine-tuning. "See," he said, pausing on a graph showing user churn overlaid with brand touchpoint frequency. "I think if we lean into this as a storytelling angle, we can really sell the strategy." I stared at him. "Trevor, that's the model I built using the Gen Z cohort tracker, the one with the feedback loop algorithm." He gave a half smile. "Of course. Great foundation. I just dressed it up for execs." He said it like he'd done me a favor. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling fan above my bed, its blades circling endlessly in the dark, like the questions spinning in my head. Was I being petty? Was I overreacting? Did it matter if the client never heard my name? I thought about speaking up. I even drafted an email to HR, then deleted it. Instead, I did something different. I added a hidden watermark to the final model I'd built. A single line of code in the metadata, invisible unless you knew where to look. It read, "Analysis by David R. Miles, V107. Just my name." A quiet fingerprint. The meeting started like all the others. The boardroom was full, catered coffee, and mini pastries lined up at the side table. Nexora's team came in looking sharp. 2 men in navy suits and a woman with bright red glasses who seemed to scan everything like a hawk. Trevor stood at Awalas, the front, iPad in hand, voice smooth as ever. He walked them through the deck, slide by slide, hitting all the right notes. They nodded, asked questions, jotted things down. And then, about halfway through, something strange happened. The woman with the red glasses, her name was Dana, I later learned, interrupted mid-slide. "Can I ask who ran the analysis on this churn loop model?" she said, pointing at the graph I'd spent 4 days calibrating. Trevor blinked. "We built it internally." "Yes, but who specifically ran it?" There was a pause. I felt my chest tighten. Trevor cleared his throat. "Our team collaborated across departments. It's just," Dana said, tapping her tablet, "the embedded metadata says David R. Miles. That you?" The room fell silent. Trevor froze. I didn't. "I'm David," I said, my voice louder than I expected. "I built that model. Happy to walk you through the math if you'd like." Dana looked at me, then smiled. "Thought so. The logic string reminded me of a paper I saw at Northwestern's conference last year. Yours?" I nodded, throat suddenly dry. Trevor made some noise about team collaboration again, but nobody was listening. From that point on, the meeting pivoted. They asked me the questions about the data, the projections, the strategy. Trevor stood to the side, still smiling, but with that twitch around the corner of his mouth that only shows when someone realizes they've lost control. By the end of the hour, Dana shook my hand directly. "Brilliant work, David. We want your insights driving this account moving forward." She didn't say Trevor's name once. Back at my desk, I stared at the coffee cup again. Still warm, still mine. I didn't gloat. I didn't post about it on LinkedIn. I didn't even tell my friends. But that night, when Bruno curled up next to me and I shut down my laptop, I whispered something into the quiet room. "Good job, David." I was halfway through clearing old emails when the meeting recap popped up. Just a few lines from Dana, CCing both Trevor and the regional director. The subject line read, Nexora Kickoff, assigning David as data lead. My cursor froze mid-delete. For the first time in 3 years, my name had been placed ahead of Trevor's in a client thread. The aftermath of that meeting should have felt like a win. But if you've ever outshined your boss in front of a client, especially one as image-obsessed as Trevor Kingsley, you know it's not that simple. Trevor didn't yell. He didn't email me after, didn't even mention it directly in our next morning stand-up. He just shifted. Subtle things at first. My name was left off the internal planning calendar for the Nexora project. A shared drive folder mysteriously disappeared, the one with my original model documentation. I asked Lisa from admin about it, and she told me it had been restructured for project consistency. Project consistency, my ass. Still, I didn't say anything. Not yet. I told myself to play the long game. After all, Nexora wanted me. That had to mean something. A week later, I had my first solo sync with Dana. It was just a 30-minute Zoom call, but I prepped for it like it was a TED Talk. Clean visuals, real-time data pull from the engagement dashboard, an optional side simulation in case she wanted to explore projections. I even ironed my shirt for it, and I work from home. Dana joined exactly on time. No small talk. "Walk me through your process," she said, sipping something from a Nexora-branded mug. I shared my screen and started slow. Behavior clusters, trigger points, trend accelerators, the good stuff. Halfway through, she cut in. "What's your official title at M&R?" I blinked. Senior data analyst? Not lead? No, that'd be... I stopped myself. She nodded slowly. All right. That's all she said, but the tone carried weight. Later that evening, I got a Teams ping from Trevor K. Need to align on messaging before the next Nexora deck. Let's keep things tight. No solo syncs without routing insights through the core team first. THX. No good job, no acknowledgement, just a leash. I vented to Bruno that night, sitting on the kitchen floor with my back against the fridge while he licked peanut butter from a toy. "Do you think I screwed up?" I muttered, watching him blink lazily. He tilted his head like he was either considering the philosophical weight of betrayal or just wondering if I'd drop more peanut butter. Probably the second one. Still, I couldn't shake the knot in my chest. I hadn't set out to show Trevor up. I just wanted to be seen, recognized. That wasn't too much to ask, right? The next internal pitch meeting was different. Not the content. I'd still done most of the back-end analysis, but the vibe. Trevor walked in with his usual confidence, but his jokes didn't land. People didn't laugh as easily. And I noticed something else. A few of the younger analysts were watching me now. Not him. After my walkthrough of the latest engagement cycle model, one of the newer guys, Alex, messaged me on Teams. Alex L. "Hey man, your logic tree on that feedback loop? Brilliant. Would love to learn how you built that if you've got time." I stared at the message for a full minute. 3 years in this company, dozens of models, hundreds of hours of silent effort. No one had ever messaged me like that. "Sure," I typed back. "Let's set something up." The shift didn't go unnoticed. Trevor started sitting in on my breakout sessions, even when he wasn't needed. He began rewording my slides mid-meeting, cutting in with vague summaries that made the ideas sound generic. I adapted. I started watermarking all my major work internally. Not just metadata, but subtle notes in the visuals, intentional phrasing quirks and captions, even a small DM signature in tiny font on data visualizations. It wasn't about ego. It was about accountability. Because I knew, deep down, Trevor wouldn't go down easy. Then came the internal review cycle. Every 6 months, our company did performance evaluations. Most people dreaded them. I didn't. I had a solid portfolio, strong KPIs, good peer reviews, but something was off this time. When I opened my evaluation summary, the ratings were fine, nothing bad, but the written feedback shows promise in data development, but occasionally works in silos. Would benefit from clearer alignment with leadership messaging. Needs to improve collaboration cadence with project leads. I read those lines 3 times, Trevor had clearly framed me as a rogue operator. And worse, HR had bought it. I considered going over his head. I really did. But the thing about corporate structures is they protect each other. If I tried to lodge a formal complaint without concrete proof, I'd just be seen as a disgruntled employee with a bruised ego. So I took a different route. I started documenting every slide I made, every analysis, every conversation where my input was diluted or redirected. I kept a private log, time-stamped, with backups in a cloud folder only I could access. I didn't advertise it, didn't make a scene. I just prepared. Because sooner or later, I knew Trevor would go too far. And when he did, I'd be ready. That moment came 2 months later. Nexora had asked us to do a live strategic audit in front of their investors. It wasn't just a deck this time. It was a cross-team demonstration, showcasing exactly how our analysis had driven campaign ROI. It was huge. Trevor pulled me into a prep meeting and said, "You're not presenting." I blinked. "What?" "We need consistency. One voice. I'll present your models. You'll just be there for back-end support in case anything breaks." He said it with that same oily smile, like I was a dishwasher for a Michelin star chef. I didn't argue. I just nodded and waited. The night before the presentation, I got a call. Dana. "Hey," she said, voice unusually casual. "Quick thing. Can you send me the latest audience retargeting model? Trevor's deck looked different." I paused. Different how? He stripped the time decay adjustment, said it was too technical. I swallowed hard. That adjustment is the model. Without it, the ROI is a guess. "Yeah," she said. "That's what I thought." I sent her the original. Then I added a note. It read, "For accuracy, please refer to this version. The live demo version omits key components critical to our projections." And I signed it. David R. Miles, lead analyst, unofficial. The next day, I showed up to the presentation in a crisp navy blazer I hadn't worn since my sister's wedding. Trevor took the stage, slick, confident, charming. He launched into the deck, weaving his usual spell. But then, about 10 minutes in, Dana raised her hand. "Trevor," she said, "can you walk us through the time decay logic embedded in the retargeting curve?" Trevor blinked, just for a second. Then he recovered. "Well, the general idea is that over time, engagement—" "Yes," she cut in, "but specifically the way David modeled the touchpoint half-life and the recency-weighted index. Can you speak to that?" The silence was sharp enough to cut the air. Trevor glanced at me, so I stood up. "I can explain that," I said, stepping forward, "if that's okay." Dana gestured to the stage. "Please." It was 9:42 a.m. on a Wednesday when I stood in front of the largest projector screen in our downtown conference center. My name wasn't listed on the printed agenda. My title wasn't included in the email invitation. But every pair of eyes in the room, investors, analysts, clients, was now on me. And Trevor? He sat just off stage, jaw tight, fingers steepled like a man watching a chess game he was no longer playing. I took a slow breath and tapped my pointer at the slide. "The retargeting curve here," I began, "isn't just a backward-looking trend. It's a weighted model that incorporates engagement decay, meaning we factor in not just whether someone clicked, but how recently they engaged, and how that correlates to intent." I heard someone from Nexora whisper, "That's actually smart," to their neighbor. It was the kind of throwaway line that wouldn't show up in meeting minutes, but I heard it, and I remembered it, because 3 years into this job, I'd learned to measure praise in whispers, not applause. I walked them through the model line by line. No jargon, no flash. Just the numbers, the logic, the reality. Every sentence I said pulled attention away from Trevor. Every slide I explained was a piece of the story he thought he could claim as his own. When I finished, Dana gave me a slight nod, then turned to Trevor. "Thanks, David," she said. "That clarified a lot." Trevor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We're a collaborative shop," he said smoothly, voice still warm. "David and I work closely." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because Dana wasn't looking at him anymore. Later that day, after the room emptied and the investors had moved on to cocktails and chatter, I returned to my desk. My inbox had 2 new emails. The first was from Dana. Just one line. "You were exceptional. Expect a follow-up." The second was from Trevor. "Swing by my office." His office was glass-walled and annoyingly pristine. He had a fake bonsai tree on his desk that he watered like it was real, and an old rugby trophy behind him, even though no one had ever seen him play a sport. He didn't ask me to. "Sit." "I need you to understand something," he said, folding his arms. "This company has a rhythm, a structure. When we present to clients, the message has to be unified." I didn't speak. He went on, voice tightening. "Undermining that structure, even unintentionally, weakens our position." I finally raised an eyebrow. "You mean answering a client's question honestly?" Trevor's nostrils flared. "This isn't about you," he said. "It's about perception. Optics. You think Dana's going to give a damn about the next quarter's report if she thinks we can't maintain a coherent front?" "Dana cares about results," I said flatly. "That's why she asked me, because I gave her a model that worked." Trevor stepped around his desk, lowering his voice. "Look, I get it. You want credit. That's fine. But the way you're going about this, it's political suicide." I smiled, just a little. "Only if the people in power aren't paying attention." That week, HR scheduled my development plan review. Standard language, but the timing, not standard. I knew Trevor had pulled that string. We sat in one of those anonymous glass fishbowl rooms, me and a junior HR coordinator who looked like she still wore her college ID on weekends. "Some of your recent conduct," she said, glancing at her notes, "suggests a possible misalignment with company collaboration goals." I stayed quiet. She cleared her throat. "That includes uncoordinated client engagement, deviating from presentation guidelines, and potential overstepping of defined role responsibilities." It was theater. A slow, polite reprimand delivered with a smile. I looked at her and said, "Do you want to see the emails?" She blinked. "What emails?" "The ones where Trevor told me to strip core logic from the model. The metadata showing my authorship. The timestamps. The client's direct request that I answer, not him." A beat. "I didn't come in here empty-handed." I pulled out my personal laptop. Not connected to company servers. Not visible to admin. I had every thread. Every iteration. A digital footprint that laid it all bare. The HR rep's expression changed. What started as a formal coaching session quickly turned into a clumsy, defensive scramble. "I'll, escalate this appropriately," she said. I nodded, calm. "You do that." Over the next week, things got weird. People avoided me in the hallway. My name was left off 2 internal client calendar invites, and I caught wind of a rumor that I was being considered for reassignment. But then something shifted. Dana requested another joint strategy session, but this time she specifically asked that I lead it. No Trevor. A day later, a recruiter from another firm reached out. Apparently, Dana had mentioned me during a lunch with a contact in their Chicago office. And then the bomb dropped. The director of operations, a woman named Marcia, who rarely dealt with analysts, pulled me into a private Zoom call. "David," she said, "we've received some mixed internal feedback about your recent visibility. But client side, you're killing it. Nexora has formally requested that you be their main point of contact for analytics moving forward. I sat back, stunned. Marcia continued, "So here's what we're offering. A temporary title bump, acting lead data strategist. You'll still report through Trevor officially, but functionally, you'll be driving this account." That last sentence stung more than I expected. I hesitated. "Still reporting through Trevor?" "Only for now," she said quickly. "Think of it as a transition period." I nodded slowly. "And if I decline?" She paused. "I'd say you'd still be assigned to Nexora, but someone else would be guiding the messaging. And frankly, that wouldn't help your visibility long term." It was a trap, wrapped in a promotion. I thanked her and logged off. Then I stared at my screen for a long, long time. That night, I opened my notebook. I'd been keeping a private journal since the day Trevor first claimed my model. Just pen and paper. No screenshots, just thoughts. I flipped through the pages, reading my own doubts, my own anger, the small humiliations I'd swallowed, the praise I never received, the good work done in silence. At the very back of the notebook, I wrote one sentence: "You don't have to play the game to win it." The next morning, I met with Dana in a local cafe near the Nexora satellite office. Not company property, not under M&R surveillance. "Thanks for meeting," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" I slid a USB stick across the table. "This has every model, every update, every annotation I've made since day one. You've got the raw logic. You've got the visuals. You've got everything." She frowned. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you asked for transparency. And because if I go quiet after this week, I want you to have the real record." Dana's eyes narrowed. "Are they threatening you?" "Not directly," I said. "But it's coming. This is insurance." She picked up the USB, turned it over in her hand. "And what do you want in return?" I shook my head. "Nothing. Just don't let them erase me." The polished wood table in the boardroom gleamed under the lights, freshly cleaned, probably for the executive team visit. It looked elegant, prestigious, the kind of place where decisions happen. But my stomach churned like I was about to defend myself in court, not review campaign data. Everyone looked composed. I felt like my hands were shaking loud enough to hear. When I agreed to stay on the Nexora project under Trevor's chain of command, for now, I'd told myself I could handle it. I was wrong. Every meeting, every email, every deck we shared, Trevor was there, hovering, redirecting, translating my points, polishing off the edges of my work and pretending the raw stone never existed. Only now, after Dana's silent nod at the coffee shop and the USB tucked away in her bag, I had something different. Leverage. I didn't want to use it, not unless I had to. But the longer this dragged on, the more I realized Trevor wasn't slowing down. He was accelerating. A week after the new title was announced, acting lead data strategist, Trevor called an all-hands with the strategy team. It wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the slide he opened with: "New vision for the Nexora account." He stood there, smug as ever, in front of a dozen people and said, "We're pivoting from granular model logic to storytelling-led insights. Strategy first. Data supported, not data-driven." I froze. He was about to gut the entire framework I'd built. "We'll still use David's dashboards," Trevor said casually, "but the messaging will come from a more cohesive, top-down narrative, cleaner, more brand-forward." Translation: strip the model, use the visuals, and pretend it's just packaging. I caught Alex, the junior analyst, glancing at me with confusion. He knew what this meant. We all did. Trevor was dumbing down the product for optics and taking credit. Again. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk in a fog. Slack messages pinged, emails stacked up. But all I saw was that first slide, that smug grin, that title he'd put on it. New vision. My vision, with his name on the frame. It was Thursday afternoon when Dana called. Quick check-in, she said. I saw Trevor's narrative preview. It's fine, but it's shallow. Not what you showed me. I hesitated. He's pushing for strategy-led messaging. He's not the strategist, she said bluntly. I know, I said. There was a pause on the line. Then she added, I know more than you think, David. Friday morning, I was pulled into a one-on-one with Marcia, the director of ops. She looked calm, corporate calm, smiling eyes, flat tone, HR-safe language. I've been hearing some noise, David, she said. Trevor's concerned that your role on Nexora is becoming disruptive. I blinked. Disruptive how? He says you're going around him, setting your own narrative. I almost laughed. I'm responding to client questions, providing accurate information. Yes, she said, tapping her pen, but there's a difference between accurate and aligned. There it was again. Optics. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said, you might want to ask Nexora which they prefer. The next week, things unraveled fast. First, Trevor removed me from 2 client calls, citing reduced overlap. Then, my dashboard access was temporarily revoked due to maintenance. And finally, on Wednesday at 3:17 p.m., I got an internal memo. Pending further review of project scope realignment, you are being reassigned to secondary support for Nexora Q3 initiatives. In other words, demoted, silently, strategically, punished for being seen. I walked into the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and sat on the toilet with the lid down. I didn't cry, but my face was hot, my jaw tight. My hands were clenched in fists, so tight my nails left crescent-shaped dents in my palms. I stayed there for 10 minutes. Then I got up, washed my hands, and walked straight into Dana's office. I need to tell you something, I said. She closed her laptop and nodded. I didn't pull out the USB. I didn't need to. I'd already given her everything. Instead, I laid it out. The strategy, the model, the pivot Trevor was forcing, the way he was systematically removing me from the project I built. Dana didn't flinch. When I finished, she just said, okay. Then, do you trust me? I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, yes, and left. What happened next, I wasn't ready for. Monday morning, company-wide email. Subject, Org Update Strategic Partnerships. Trevor Kingsley was being reassigned to explore new business initiatives outside of client-facing operations. In corporate speak, that was exile. People said nothing out loud, but Slack was full of question marks, reaction emojis, and side DMs. And me? I just sat at my desk, stunned. Then my calendar updated. A new meeting, leadership alignment, Nexora. Organizer, Dana. Location, 21st floor conference suite. Attendees, me, Dana, Marcia. 1 person from legal, 2 partners. I sat at the table, heart thudding. Dana opened with no fanfare. David, she said, we want to move forward with you as the primary strategic lead on Nexora, not interim, not acting, lead. I blinked. She continued, but more than that, we're offering a retention package. You've been underpaid, undercredited, and overlooked. We want to change that. Marcia nodded silently. We also reviewed the logs you shared, Dana added. Trevor's behavior violated our ethics guidelines. We've handled it. I didn't ask how. I didn't need to. For once, someone saw it. Saw me. The next few days felt like a blur. People stopped avoiding me. My inbox filled with messages like, congrats, well-deserved, Heard about the promo. Long overdue, man. About time you got the recognition. I said thank you, but inside, I was still processing. 3 years of silence, 3 years of quiet theft, and now, finally, sunlight. But this isn't some fantasy ending. Trevor didn't disappear. He just stopped being above me. Now he sends reports to me. Sometimes he tries to be friendly. Sometimes he still talks like he's in charge. I let him. Because at the end of the day, his name's not on the client calls. His voice isn't in the strategy memos. His slides don't get sent ahead. Mine do. And 1 week later, during a call with Dana and the Nexora board, she said it again. This time loud, with the whole leadership team listening. David, you've built a brilliant model. We trust you. Lead the way. The new badge wasn't heavy, just honest. It hung from my neck like a quiet correction. Plastic, laminated, with lead strategist printed underneath my name. No gold embossing, no flourish. But every time I saw it catch the light, it reminded me that my work finally had weight. 2 months had passed since Trevor's demotion. Long enough for people to stop whispering about it, but not long enough for them to forget. The shift in the office atmosphere was subtle, like a storm had passed and left everything just a little clearer. The air felt less tense. Meetings ran smoother. Junior staff started speaking up more. And for the first time since I joined M&R, people asked me for guidance, not for data pulls, not for back-end support, for leadership. I didn't become someone different overnight. I still brought Bruno to work from home days, still nuked leftovers in the break room microwave, still preferred dashboards over PowerPoints. But something inside me, something I didn't realize had been twisted up, started to unwind. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was building. Dana and I developed a rhythm. She brought strategy muscle. I brought modeling precision. Our check-ins turned into brainstorming sessions. She pushed me to think bigger, beyond just projections and insights. Where are we leading the client, she'd ask. Not where they are, where they need to be. It was a different lens. I liked it. It challenged me in a way Trevor never did. He managed upward. Dana led outward. There's a difference. Meanwhile, Trevor tried to stay relevant. He bounced between emerging projects and vague cross-functional initiatives. I'd see his name pop up in all staff threads, pitching half-baked ideas like blockchain-adjacent loyalty ecosystems. Nobody bit. Eventually, he stopped showing up to all hands entirely. Rumor was he was interviewing elsewhere. I didn't ask. Then came the all-hands summit. Every 6 months, the company gathered in person, rented out a floor in the Loop, catered lunch, team-building exercises, all that. I wasn't looking forward to it. Small talk wasn't my thing, and Trevor would be there. But this time, I wasn't attending as a face in the crowd. I was giving the keynote case study on Nexora. And halfway through my presentation, something unexpected happened. Applause. Real, spontaneous applause. Not forced, not polite, just honest appreciation. Not because I delivered some rousing speech, but because the room believed what I showed them. That data could tell a story. That analysis wasn't just back-end work. It was leadership. When I stepped off the stage, people clapped me on the back, shook my hand. Trevor wasn't in the room. He left during the intro. Someone said he looked small. Later, during lunch, Alex, the junior analyst, sat next to me. I wanted to say thanks, he said, opening a can of LaCroix. For that day, you explained the retargeting model. That stuck with me, changed how I approach my work. I smiled. You're doing great, man. I see your dashboards. They're tight. He looked down, a little embarrassed, then asked, Did you always know this was going to happen? I paused. No, I said. I didn't think any of it would, not at first. So what kept you going? I thought for a second. then answered, I didn't want someone else to keep winning with my voice in their mouth. 1 week after the summit, I got a package in the mail. No return address. Inside was a leather-bound notebook. No note. No name. Just one line handwritten on the first page. I was wrong. You were always the strategist. I knew the handwriting. Trevor. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. I placed it on a shelf in my office, not for revenge, not for pride, just as proof that sometimes the truth does rise. I still don't consider myself a success story. I didn't get rich. I didn't start my own firm. I didn't become a thought leader with 1 million LinkedIn followers. But I did get to walk into a room and know, truly know, that my work mattered. And not because someone else said it did, because it spoke for itself. A few weeks ago, Dana and I had drinks after a long strategy session. She raised her glass and said, "To clarity." I asked, "Clarity?" She smirked. The moment you stop asking if it's ego and start recognizing it's just justice. I raised my glass. To justice. We drank. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.